Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the Alertus webinar series. My name is Jamie Underwood, Director of Marketing Communications at Alertus Technologies, and I will be moderating today's webinar on integrating campus-wide notification, highlighting Washington University in St. Louis. Eric Stafford, Director of Higher Education Sales at Alertus Technologies, will also be joining us for the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We ask that you please hold all questions to the end of the webinar. However, feel free to type any questions in the chat box during the presentation, and we'll be sure to come back to those during the Q&A at the end of the session. This webinar is being recorded, so please email marketing@alertus.com if you're interested in receiving a recording of today's webinar. I would now like to introduce today's presenters, Matt Arthur and Mark Bagby. Matt Arthur is Director of Incident Communications Solutions at Washington University in St. Louis. Matt has been in IT for 29 years and at WUSTL for 26 years. In his present position, he collects and interprets functional requirements for multiple organizations and develops an overall technology plan for supporting communications during incidents. Matt is also a certified information systems security professional. Our second presenter, Mark Bagby, is Director of Emergency Management at Washington University in St. Louis. Mark holds a Master's in Biosecurity and Disaster Preparedness from St. Louis University. He is Chair of the Campus Safety, Health, and Environmental Management Association's Emergency Management Committee. Additionally, he is involved in disaster and event planning through the St. Louis metro area and founded the St. Louis Emergency Management University Consortium to help institutions of higher education with emergency planning. And now, without further ado, I would like to turn it over to our presenters.
Thanks, Jamie. This is Matt, and I'll get started. So Mark and I are actually sitting at the same table. We're using a Jabra 510 speakerphone. So if for some reason you're having a hard time or you're getting feedback or something, just type in a comment and Jamie will pass it on to us. Hopefully, though, it's been pretty successful in the past. So actually, let me step back. As you notice, we say emergency notification phase 3, and that's because when we started this process a few years ago, we actually have done a couple other of these webinars or presentations where we talked about our phase 1, which is the installation, and phase 2, where we added some more equipment and communication modules, and now phase 3, we're just bringing everybody sort of up to date. So we'll do some recap as well as tell you about the new technology that we've incorporated. All right, you see the Washington University in St. Louis, sort of the slide that everyone has to put up when they do a presentation. I think the key part here for us is the host of. If you'll notice, besides the Olympics and World's Fair way before I was born, although Mark would tell you otherwise, we do host a lot of big events here at Washington University. As you can see, we were chosen to host 4 presidential debates, and then we hosted the vice presidential debate in 2008. We were also a backup for the 2012. So if there had been an incident or a problem at one of those universities at the last minute, we were expected to step up and fill in. You'll also see the last sort of big event we hosted was the Global Clinton Initiative University in 2013, where we had over 1,000 high school and college age kids from all over the world here at the university working with Chelsea Clinton and her dad, former President Clinton. And in each one of those, we had to be prepared to handle any sort of emergencies that might come up and get that word out. So this goes beyond just preparing for the stuff you read about in the papers. At our university, at Washington University, we're always conscious of these sorts of commitments that we make, and to make sure that we can fulfill our task if we have to not only reach our faculty, staff, and students, but as important, any visitor who comes onto our campus. All right, so here's sort of the phase 1 and phase 2, right? And if you notice in the timeline, in 2007, WUSTL, that's WashU in St. Louis, we actually purchased ClearText, which was a text service that was opt-in, and we had actually purchased that before Virginia Tech. We got it in February. Virginia Tech happened in April. Because at the time our telecommunications folks were wanting to get some sort of messaging system where university could use it to send out things like, hey, the football game's moved from 3 o'clock to 1 o'clock, or just those sort of standard announcements that would go out. Then of course Virginia Tech happened, and then the following year, in 2008, Northern Illinois happened, as you might recall, on Valentine's Day in February. So like a year after we had purchased ClearText, and what we found in that year, because ClearText was an opt-in process, we got, I think at our maximum we got was 10% buy-in from the university. That just wasn't going to cut it. Number one. Number two, ClearText soon became overwhelmed because they were truly just a social notification system. They were not built to handle emergencies. In fact, they got bought out by Rave at some point during that year interim. But then also, and Mark's group came in the picture from emergency operations, to where the university sat down and went through the process, did a formal RFP, and purchased EverBridge to be our communications a system where we would send them a message and they send it back to us in text, voice, and email in 2008. And you can see in 2009 we added sirens, external sirens that the county could set off, but we also wanted the ability to set them off. So you see we started adding different modes of communication, and a slide coming up you'll see our total communication array. But these are the highlights. And we soon realized in that, especially when the sirens came in, because we realized we can't expect that the dispatchers or anyone, in the event of a shooter on campus or a tornado or something that needs immediate communication, to send out notices on 4 or 5 different modes of communication all within a short period of time and still do their job. We had to figure out a way to put it all under one interface, put it all under one roof. And then again, the timeline goes in 2010, as you can see, I started having conversations with Alert Us to sort of, at that time, they were fairly well known as this provider of intermediate emergency communications with their Alert Us beacons and then their desktop pop-ups. But I wanted more than that. I wanted them to be our interface, our umbrella interface, to bring all of our modes of communication so that we can just use one system, click it, and go. And then and it sets off multiple modes of communication. So we went through the process. We did an RFP. We actually came down to where we had 2 finalists. One that provided us with a turnkey system, given the existing modes of communication, which was basically well, gosh, I don't even remember now, but I do remember that when we asked them about how can we interface with EverBridge, can we tie that into this system, and they wanted like an extra $9,000, and it was going to take them 6 months to build an extra widget to put in this turnkey system. When we talked to Alert Us, they took a look at the API, communicated with EverBridge, and had that communication link set up for us within 2 weeks at no extra charge. So they really did help us go through this process and bring the sirens, which were under one system, to bring EverBridge, and then our other modes of communication all under this one roof. That was phase 1. We had Alert Us up and running on campus in 2011. As you can see, phase 2, learn, adapt, and grow, that's where we started looking at, okay, we want to add more stuff. And you can see we added RSS feed to our emergency website, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then in 2013, we went to mass notification, and again, we'll talk about it a little bit, but that's basically in your buildings, instead of just a straight fire alarm with a horn and strobe, it adds voice to that mix, voice, a horn, and strobe. So there's different specs that you have to obey, et cetera, et cetera. So we went through that process, though, in the last couple of years, in those 2 years, to add those different modes of communication as we continue to look forward. And I would be loath to not mention, but if you notice up on top under phase 1, we said establish need, clarify goals, find solutions. All right, that's one of the things that Mark's group, and Mark will talk about that in a little bit, what helps us bring to the table. He helps his group helps set the stage so that all the players, the major players in the crisis management team, the disaster preparedness group, can come together and plan out and establish what those goals and those processes are ahead of time. So we don't have to fight with that while we're trying to add the technology, which is where I come in. And then you can see phase 3, basically, as we say, never settle, always scan the horizon. This is just our way of saying we're always looking out there at new technologies and thinking, how can that technology, or could it be wrapped in, could it replace something that we have existing? Is there a better way to do that, or is this something totally new? Things like the Polygon-based weather alerts. Mark will talk about that, but that's kind of cool because we can sort of narrow down where those alerts come from, as opposed to a full county-wide alert. And if you're from the Midwest, if you're from St. Louis especially, or Oklahoma or something, you know that tornadoes come in and you know, they can affect a whole area, and yet from a warning perspective, and yet, you know, the actual effect is very, very localized. We'll talk about the EverBridge. We've actually went from EverBridge, the original version we had 5 years ago, to an upgrade. We also are upgrading our siren system to another piece of software. We increased our voice over fire alarm. We went from 3 buildings where we installed it, tested it, brought in we have the county fire marshal. I remember Mark and I, we actually had an argument with one of the fire marshal representatives about what the NFPA standard actually meant, and we finally got everybody to agree that our interpretation that voice messages override the fire alarm itself was one that took us, gosh, I don't know, months to sort of arm wrestle through. But we got it, and so over the last couple of years, we've added multiple buildings to that. We've upgraded our desktop pop-ups as Alertus comes out with new versioning. We've added a cable TV override, and then most especially we've added the WUSTL app. And I think that's probably the coolest thing that we're going to talk about, so let's move forward. This is a picture of our current system. As you can see, and I believe you can see my mouse flying around, this is an example of our emergency website, which Mark will talk about a little bit more in depth. Here's our beacons. You can see we've got almost 100 beacons installed, just over 9,000 desktop pop-ups installed. We have EverBridge, which is email and texting, because we learned early on, if you're going to send out a mass notification, do not use voice. If you're going to do something where you're going to send out a notification to just a crisis management team, great. But otherwise, if you're going to send it to 29,000 people, just use email and text. You can see voice over fire alarm. We have over 36 buildings. We have 3. We're about to double that number of indoor PA systems. Our CATV plant has a complete override system. Our outdoor sirens, and then of course our WUSTL app, which is our newest. So the one that interestingly that we don't have underneath there, that we don't have posted here, is each individual. We really do emphasize that as we sort of have done grassroots campaigns in the past, to emphasize that there may be 10 or 12 or whatever modes of communication listed up here, but each individual who gets that message, we rely upon them to be that extra mode of communication, because not everybody's going to get every one of these messages, and so if you get it, it's inherent upon you to tell the rest of the people in your location, whether it's your office or whether you're out sitting at the picnic table having lunch, to let them know what's going on. And now on to Mark.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Bagby here. I wanted to start talking about our website. Anytime we send out a message, at the end of the message, we push people back to our emergency website, emergency.wustl.edu. Now, with this, when we do text message and email, we got a lot of complaints and inquiries of, is this spam, is this phishing? Because it asks you to click on links, it doesn't have the WashU logo on it, and we push people back to our website. But in version 1.0 and 2.0, we relied on public affairs to log onto the system and replicate that message onto the website. Well, by using an RSS feed, we found a way to automatically publish that to the web page, so there's no human interaction, and within seconds of sending the message, it's duplicated on the website. So day to day, we use the stoplight approach. So green means go, everything's good. Red means stop, danger. So on a normal day, you get the green bar, no emergency. Then if we're testing the system or have just some kind of FYI information, we can go in manually and put a message up there. So here you see a test of the WUSTL alert system. It's just kind of cautionary. And then when we have an actual alert, boom, it turns red and posts that exact message up there. And again, no human interaction is needed right there. Now, as the emergency evolves or we issue another alert, that'll publish up there. Or public affairs can go in and put add-on information of, this is what the incident was. We now want you to evacuate campus and go to, an alternate campus.
And interestingly, this is Matt again. We sort of long arm wrestled about this process, this procedure, about who would have access to this, and how would these messages be updated on the website. And what we all agreed was, when the emergency message gets pushed out, that message itself is why we use the RSS feed. That's what should go up onto the website, and it made people scratch their heads. But early on we said, hey, even the chancellor, this may be the first time he finds out about the emergency is by seeing it on the website or by seeing it pop up on his phone, and that's okay because we're not asking the chancellor or the executive vice chancellor to send out these messages. We have a core group that's authorized to do this, and then we have a process we follow by which, at some point, when as the emergency becomes less life-threatening and more informative, then somebody like public affairs will take over that completely. Thus, we continue to push people always to that emergency website because that's where the information is going to go. And we think that over the years, that emergencies on campuses, whether they're shootings or fires or whatever the emergency is, Americans have learned that's how you find out the latest information. You go to the website, you see what's being posted, as opposed to calling the chancellor's office or something. So one of the lessons we learned early on was sort of twofold. One, obviously, be ready for lots of hits to your website. The other one was, in my role as the Director of Incident Communications, part of what I do is work with the technology people, and then work with the non-technology people, and try to translate between the two. And the short story goes that when we built the original emergency website, I had the public affairs people talking directly to our engineers over at the data center side. And when I asked each of them, how are things? They'd all say, things are good, it's going to be great, it can handle a big load, so on and so forth. Well, what I found out was, to the engineers, it's great meant one thing. To public affairs, it's great meant something different. So that we actually had an incident on campus where, not a live incident, thankfully, but we had one of our dispatchers who, they have to go through this e-learning module, this Captivate module, to go through it, pass it, before we actually give them real access to the Alert Us interface, so they can send out emergency messages. And again, at that level, by the way, they have a very limited template that they can drop down. They have a drop down that talks about, there's shooter on campus at 6 different campuses they can choose from, and then they have tornado alert or an all clear. That's really it. So when they go through the training, they go through and it's all emulated on this Captivate screen. Well, the lesson Mark learned, or we learned, was don't let the dispatchers work on Captivate at the same workstation while they are actually doing dispatch work, because what happens, the dispatcher got distracted and then went back in and actually started up Alert Us in real time, in real mode, thinking that they were still in the Captivate e-learning module, and sent out a shooter on campus alert. As fate would have it, they chose the wrong campus, so they failed in many ways, not just one. But then we sent out the all clear literally within 2 minutes. I want to say within 2 minutes, Chief of Police and Mark both saw it, and they jumped on it and sent out, checked to make sure that wasn't true, sent out the all clear. What happened was, though, our setup at the time, our server, was slowed down to the point to where it appeared to people as if it was frozen. It never actually froze. It never actually stopped working. It just really got slow. And so what happens was one person would log in, and while they were waiting, they couldn't resist hitting the return key like 15 times. So each person was actually sending 15 requests to the web server. And you multiply that, and so within a 5-minute period, we just had, I don't know, 20, 30,000 requests. So what the public affairs people thought was really good was the interface and how nice it looked and how easy it was for them to access. What the engineers thought was really good was they thought 3,000 hits in a 30-minute period was a good number, and functionally the thing seemed to work well. So my bad for not sitting them down and making them tell me what they meant by that, and then working through it. So this what you see up here is actually what the design that we ended up with as a baseline. We have the users out here that goes through the campus firewall. They get directed to either one of our load balancers, and our load balancers are pulling the website, the WordPress website, from either one of two servers. Behind those servers is actually the WordPress master server, so that if our public affairs people have to make it updates, they log into that master server while the thousands and thousands out in the community are hitting these two cache servers. And then that way our public affairs folks can get on it, make the message, and then push it up. And then it'll make its way onto these cache servers as the cycles allow, which then gives us the advantage. We figured out our documentation or our specs show that we're up to 60,000 a minute or something. I mean, it's a much higher resolution, much higher access resolution than it used to be. Now, in case we ever get to the point where our emergency website is totally crashed, now more likely it'll be a DNS outage. A total DNS outage. We have a couple DNS servers here at university, and then our backup is at a university, a separate university outside the region. But we wanted to say, hey, listen, we're an epicenter for earthquake. There's a good chance that we're going to get hit by a big earthquake, and it could cause Katrina-like damage. It could take out our access, which means we could be like Tulane University after Katrina, where for days nobody could go to tulane.edu to see what was going on. They couldn't communicate. Well, we wanted to avoid that, so we have an agreement with the Indiana University Global NOC. It's the Internet 2 NOC, to where they host this actual website, what you're looking at right now. It's just an HTML flat file HTML site. It has no DNS attached to it right now. It's a straight IP address. And they are monitoring our DNS servers. They're also monitoring our websites and our web servers. If they see, not only if they lose contact with all of the things they're monitoring, but there's a corresponding CNN event, meaning they're watching CNN and it shows this massive earthquake in St. Louis. They lose access to everything we have, and then they can't get a hold of us within a certain time period. They're then authorized to contact our backup DNS site and have them make the change so all web traffic now goes to the Indiana University Global NOC. What that allows us is that, first of all, it shows this, and then our public affairs people and our network people have access to those folks at the Global NOC, to where our public affairs people can log in and make changes to this website, or they can call the Global NOC folks and have them make the changes if for some reason the public affairs people can't actually access it. So this gives us an out-of-region area that can manage the traffic and it gives us a backup. It allows us to communicate, which is really the key thing. We want the chancellor to be able to communicate as quickly as possible.
So the way that the interface works, how we have it set up, you can either do a manual activation or we have some automated processes to push an emergency alert out. And to the right, there's a host of different modes of communication we can push it out. So you can set it up as scripts. So for tornado warning, you want only these things to go off, whereas a shooter on campus, maybe you want everything to go off. So the manual activation kind of looks like this. Dispatchers or other authorized users log into the system using our WUSTL key or Active Directory. They select an alert they want to go out, hit send, and it's out the door. Now the other way, through automated, for weather alerts like tornado warnings, we have Alertus's Threat Watcher watching the National Weather Service feed for St. Louis County and keying on the words tornado warning St. Louis County. If that shows up true in any of the feeds that come in, then it automatically sends out our tornado warning alert, which we've predefined the message and which bells and whistles are going to go off.
And that's via the cap alert system.
Yeah.
By the way.
Now, the newer version that we're testing and getting ready to move to, since we've been working on this since last fall, is Polygon-based warnings. So the National Weather Service now sends their warnings out in polygons. So we drew a polygon around our main campus in a circular fashion with a 10-mile radius. Now, if any of the National Weather Service polygons touch ours, then it triggers the appropriate alert. If their polygon doesn't touch our polygon, then our alert doesn't go off. So for instance, if a tornado warning went off to the south or bottom of the screen and didn't touch our polygon, we would not send out a tornado warning, but if it did touch it, we'd send it out. Now, the way that you can do a lot of these things are normally one of three methods. So one is a vendor-specific API or application programming interface, and this is you're working with a company and Alertus to get things to work together. The great thing is you have a lot of control if they're willing to write that API, but the con is if the vendor doesn't want to do that, then you're out of luck. The most common is Common Alert Protocol, CAPS or IPAWS. It's an open standard, which is great because there's a lot of people writing code and pushing that out there, and you can grab that and use it, but you have less control over it because you didn't create it. And then the most simple is RSS feeds, which is what we're using for our website. It's very basic, pretty low tech, but it's also less secure and slower. Our EverBridge system that Matt talked about earlier, so we migrated to their enhanced system called Mass Notification, but there's an API that talks between Alertus and EverBridge, so we can launch the message from Alertus and push it out through EverBridge to text, call, or email you. Or if Alertus is down or we just wanted to send a text message, we can go directly into EverBridge to push that out. Now, while voice calls may be problematic and slow, projecting voice through buildings and speakers is actually a really great way to push the message out, especially for our visitors. We have a medical campus, we host a lot of events on campus, and we don't have a way to import all those visitors and guests into the EverBridge system, so we rely on some sort of voice. There's pros and cons with that. So live voice, it can be great because you can just, boom, get the message right out there. But the cons are normally it's going to be a dispatcher. You're going to have a lot of noise and phone calls coming in. If they're not cool, calm, and collected, you're not going to be able to understand them when they speak. So it may not be the best method. So a lot of people think, let's go pre-recorded. Well, it's great because you can be in a recording studio. You can take your time and re-record it. The problem with it is you can't change it because it's pre-recorded. So ideally, your best option is text-to-speech, and Alertus and some others have text-to-speech devices where whatever you type in will convert over the system text-to-speech. Now that's really great because you can kind of pre-craft your message and then just go in the last minute and add a building name so it's very specific. But the one thing people forget about is a lot of it is if you don't think about the pronunciations and grammar and abbreviations, then it's not going to sound correctly when it comes across. With the Lourdes product, we actually sent them a list of like our building names, some that are pretty hard to pronounce, and gave them the correct pronunciation, and so that's stored in the system so that when we type it, it comes through the right way.
Okay, so another one of the how does it work? So our wailing siren or big voice, the backstory goes, we had these wailing sirens and we had this software that came with it that you saw we are changing away from this summer. Well, we wanted, and that's what the county uses to contact them. What we wanted though, we wanted Alert Us to be able to intercede directly into the wailing sirens using text to speech. And in fact, when Alert Us came on campus back in 2011, 2010, we told them this was a deal breaker. They either made those sirens sing like jailbirds, or we weren't going to buy their product. We had to have a way to so that we could use the system to send out siren messages without having to go through the system that came with it, because it was just that clumsy to use. Anyway, so how does it work? We take Alert Us, you can see here on the left, via Alert Us interface, we send out a message. It goes to a text-to-speech module that's plugged into the siren controller. And by the way, Alert Us just does a really good job of keeping everything simple because it's just a contact closure. It's as if we were hooking up a microphone and keying the mic. That's all it is. So that text-to-speech, it hits the contact closure, it sends through the special message, and then that message goes out through the UHF antenna to the wailing sirens. Actually, it makes the contact to the speaker, and it sends the text-to-speech message out, and it goes out over the siren. I will say this, that Alert Us has done a great job on their algorithm to make sure that the pauses are in place, and they set them in place for each siren to make sure that the echo that took place there would be specifically mitigated. So each siren you can go, and it may be off just a little bit because it's set up differently for each space. The other part is keep your message to under 4 minutes to prevent overheating of the siren components. And I would also say this, that the reality is the sirens are good for a majority one thing, letting people know there's something going on. They're going to hear the whoop or the siren or something, and they're going to know something's going on. Now, if they're lucky and they're in the right place on campus and they can stop what they're doing and they can hear what the announcement is, that's great, right? But at a minimum, they know something's going on, and so now they're checking their phone, or they're going to go in a building. I was actually in, I think I probably skip it ahead a little bit, but I was actually in a dining room when we were testing out one of the voice over fire alarm, which is in essence the same thing, only the algorithm's different. And in that setting, everybody shut the heck up as soon as they heard the whoop whoop and listened to it, heard it was a test, and immediately started talking again. So that was good. At least inside you could hear what it was saying. Anyway, so as we said, under our 3.0, our phase 3, we are replacing Central Alert, which is the original software, and that sort of forced our hand to. We've had it for 5 years. It's on a Windows 2003 server, which Microsoft won't support anymore as of July 1st. So we worked with our integration team, and now we are moving to WeatherWarn. That will allow us to it basically allows us to do all the stuff that we wanted to do, that we've been able to do in the past, on a little bit more consistent footprint. Anyway, and by the way, that's been very, we got a lot of pressure from our data center folks because they don't want a server up there that Microsoft doesn't support either, so we had to find a replacement.
Yeah, now, a big change was in 2010, NFPA 72, Chapter 24 allowed users to tap into their voice over fire alarm system to turn it into a mass notification system. And so we started doing that on our main campus with our simplex fire alarm systems. So we currently have 36 in place. We're adding 7 more this summer, one actually on Thursday. And this is our new campus standard moving forward. Anytime a major upgrade happens in a building or a new building comes online, they have to put in a voice-over fire alarm system, and they need to tie the Alertus beacon and text-to-speech device into it so that we can do voice-over fire alarm. We've made this work so far with Simplex, Notifier, and Siemens. The one thing that the code does say, you do need to include your fire marshal or authority having jurisdiction in the process. And as Matt alluded to earlier, it's just a sit-down process to talk through of here's how we want it programmed, here's what the code allows, and then you can be granted a letter to do that. One thing you need to think about is your equipment security access. So just like your fire alarm panel is normally locked up probably in a mechanical room or a closet, your beacon and text-to-speech device should be locked up as well. We actually added a Ultronics box, which is right below the beacon, to house our text-to-speech device so that somebody can't set off a test message or an alert from that. So basically how it works is you get somebody to log into the Alertus interface. They click the message. If it's been pre-crafted, we are determine what bells and whistles are going to go off. If not, they can choose that. It pushes out to the beacon, which goes to the text-to-speech device. And just like the sirens, it plugs into a contact closure to key up those fire alarm speakers and push the message out. And then when it's done, the fire alarm returns back to its normal process. If the fire alarm was going off and we push the message out, it plays the message, and then it goes back to the fire alarm being activated.
Okay, desktop pop-ups. If you use Alertus, that's pretty standard fare. As we said, we've got 8,000 desktops out there. The cool part about it, it's a very small payload, right? So once you've loaded it onto the desktop, it's got a 2 kilobyte payload that goes back to the server and says, hey, you got any new messages? It does it like every 30 seconds or so. As you can see, it runs over port 80, so there's nothing you really have to do to sort of jump through hoops with the firewall folks. You'll notice on the right, it was April of 2011, I think, 2011, when we had just installed everything. I was actually at a board dinner for Akuta, which is a higher ed telecommunications group that I work with. And we're at the board dinner and bad weather, and all of a sudden my phone's going crazy with notifications. And what had happened was tornado warning for St. Louis County had automatically triggered the system, which set off all the alarms, including desktop pop-ups. So this kid, Philip Thomas, was a student who was in the engineering department, and he took a picture and he sent out this tweet. All the at-WUSTL computer monitors at engineering department just switched to this. Too cool. And actually, the folks from Alertus reached out to Philip to make sure he said it was okay that they use that, and Alertus uses that, and we use that as well, because it was the greatest justification for the money and the time and the effort we spent, because we installed it and it worked like a charm with nobody's intervention, which is really the payoff. All right, cable TV. Again, we looked at our cable TV system was Falls Earth that was bought out by Campus Televideo, or merged, excuse me, with Campus Televideo. Campus Televideo had their own sort of standard emergency alerting system, which would send the traditional banner across the bottom of the screen. The problem with that was it only worked for standard digital, and it only worked for standard digital that they provided. So WUSTL, here at WUSTL, we had 8 different channels, local channels that we inserted. We had 8 channels that we inserted, plus we had a number of on-air HD channels, plus we had a number of HD. We were going to upgrade to HD back then, And so we decided we don't want to pay the money where only the people that were on those particular standard definition stations could get the alert. What we wanted was something that would completely overtake the entire system, not just a banner, but the entire page for a limited period of time that told people, hey, there's something going on, especially if it's a tornado. You need to look to local news to see what, sort of get the updates, right? As you can see, we limit it to 3 minutes because we don't want to tell people, hey, there's a tornado, turn to your local channel, and then we don't give them control over their television. It is only 3 minutes, so if they've stepped out to go to the bathroom or take a shower or something, they may have missed it. But that's okay because this is just one of many modes of communication we have to talk to them. So it basically does the same thing as the other devices. Excuse me. The alert goes out to a Blade computer that's got a contact closure into a machine that overrides the system, and this is an actual picture of the alert going off. So again, it all works basically the same way. It's pretty simple. It's pretty to the point. As long as our alert servers are working, we're in really good shape. All right, the other sort of the last item that we wanted to talk about of new stuff was this mobile app, and we think this is really the coolest thing out there, right? So you can see over here on the left, this is an example of a
screen capture.
A screen capture for
iPhone.
No, iPhone's in the middle. It's the Android. Android is here on the left. iPhone's here in the middle, right? And so what happens is you go out and our students, staff, and faculty, they want to know, hey, where's the bus at, the local on-campus bus, or what courses are being offered, or what's for dinner, or what time's the library, or I want to look up Mark Bagby, and I want to send him harassing emails because he bugs me, right? So I can do that all through the app. So I'm downloading it, and I'm getting all these things in one place. Well, when we were looking out over technology a year or two, a couple years ago, and we said, hey, everybody's downloading these apps. We think that'd be a cool way to do it. So we reached out to Alert Us, and Alert Us says, yeah, well, I forget, they were either working on an app or they said, yeah, we can develop an app. And I said, no, I don't want an app just for that, because that would put us in the same position we were back when we had the original clear text, right? It would be people only downloaded it if they wanted to download it. I want to have a system to where we can push alerts out through our existing app. So people are downloading it. There's not even I don't even want an icon that says emergency notification. I just want it to be there. And so what happens is the process works that students and staff and faculty will download the apps from the Android Play Store and the iPhone Store. They'll have the app to do all these other things on. But if we send out an alert, it will notify them and pop up. Oh, Lord. And this is what will pop up, right? So here's a test of the alert. It'll come up so that they carry it with them. It's not like a text message that depending on, well, it's not like a text message, and I'll show you why in just a second. Anyway, so the point being, we have thousands of people who download this app, and starting, I think, in another week or so, or maybe this week, when they download it, they'll now have this built in, which is really cool. And again, it works through this group called Urban Airship. You can see the WUSTL mobile app. We did the custom code. We partnered with Urban Airship. We established the conduits through the Apple push notification and the Urban Airship account through Google Cloud. Notifications are initiated by Alert Us, and routing to the mobile apps is handled by Urban Airship. The thing, oh, good God, what did I do? So the thing I wanted to point out here was this last bullet. Emergency notifications are pushed to mobile devices with WUSTL apps in seconds rather than in minutes. And that's key, because what's happened is when you send out text messages, sometimes you get the second message first and the first message second, and it's out of order. This takes that away, and it gets to them in seconds, not minutes, not 15 minutes, not 20 minutes.
The other nice thing is we have a ton of summer camps and conferences over the summer. So again, guests, and a lot of them have an iPad, iPod, or a smartphone. They can download the app as well. Again, we don't have a way to really put them in our system, but now they can still get the alert through a personal device.
Right. All right, and so we did talk about protocols a little bit, and this is just a slide that I sort of forced Mark to keep in there. This sort of in a save lives now emergency. That's just a phrase that I use that says there's something happening that you literally by regulation, you have to have a procedure, a process in place to get a message out, right? And so we know that in any Save Lives Now emergency, whether it's a shooter on campus or some other sort of violence, which normally that's what we're talking about, odds are the information is going to come up through the police department or on the medical school through their protective services. That's going to come through. And what we found out early on, and what is in place at every police department, every campus police across the country, is they have protocols already. I guarantee you that if you go to your campus police chief or protective services lead and you say, hey, do you have a protocol on a shooter on campus? And if they're honest, they'll tell you that they do, and they have step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. All we wanted was that step 3 or wherever would be built in is that once it was established that there was a shooter on campus, that the supervisor on duty would then authorize the dispatcher to send out the appropriate emergency alert. And again, the ones we use are preset, so they literally log in. They hit as Mark showed you earlier. They hit a drop-down menu. They pick which campus it's on, and they click. That's it. It takes them less than 60 seconds to do the entire process, and now that dispatcher is back to their business. And again, I want to emphasize, the dispatcher has the responsibility to send it out, but they don't have the authority. Only a supervisor on duty has that authority. The hope is that will be followed within 15 to 30 minutes by someone else of a higher access, so that supervisor or Mark or myself or one of another probably 10 other people, not counting all the supervisors, have access to a higher to more templates through Alertus, that they can send out something that says that's a little bit more specific. It tells people not just which campus it's on, but which building and what's the latest information and so on. So it starts that chain or that flow of information. But when there's a Save Lives Now emergency, the most important thing in our minds is get the message out. Once it's been established, get the message out as quickly as possible. And if it has to be a little generic, we can live with that.
So just some kind of secrets to the single dashboard methodology which we're using is, first, select vendors that have interoperability built into their products, and don't be afraid to push on your vendors to push the envelope. We've pushed many times on Alertus and they delivered every time. We've pushed on our other vendors to basically say, hey, you want us to stay with your technology, then you got to work with Alertus or this other vendor to make it work to keep us in the game. And those common things, APIs, CAP, and RSS feeds help with that. Text is your lowest common denominator. A text-based method can push that out there much quicker than a live, a pre-recorded or live voice. You also need to think about, for your different alert modalities, you might have to have different alert durations so you don't burn something up, or so that people can access that technology to get more information. So our sirens, our public address, and cable TV is limited to 3 minutes for the tone and message. For our beacons, our desktop alerts, our website and stuff, we normally, for weather, we let that go for 15 minutes, and for like a shooter on campus, we can allow it to go up for 30 minutes before changing or turning it off. And then very important, kind of like Matt just talked about, you need to have the ability to define your policies and profiles to determine what gets activated before you go and buy it. Think about what message I want to put out, how do I want it to go out, how long I want it to go out. If you can figure that out before you buy a product, then you know what you're getting. If you just go out and buy something off the shelf or something that's shiny and flashy, it may not do what you want it to do.
And as Mark has pointed out before, not today, but in other presentations that we've made, we hear all the time, we are talked to all the time by other universities that want to find out what we did and how we did it, and then we find out later that they've gone out and bought a product, or they had already bought a product, and it's been sitting on the shelf for literally months, Why has it been sitting on there for months? Because they haven't worked out the policies and profiles and procedures ahead of time, and so they spend months fighting about it, trying to figure it out before they ever even put that product up and make it available to use in the case of an emergency. That's just criminal, right? So we cannot emphasize enough. Work on those policies, work on those profiles ahead of time, so at least you have a basic understanding of who's authorized, who's responsible, and what are those situations by which you were going to set that system off. All right, here's a.
So this is our kind of favorite slide that just kind of puts it all together. So again, using Alertus as a central dashboard, we've got that multimodal system that Alertus allows all those puzzle pieces to fit and those technologies to work together to keep our faculty, staff, students, and visitors informed and safe.
Okay, the only other thing we want to mention, we'll just mention quickly that that we do feel like we are justifiably proud of our system. And it has won a couple of national awards, both for at SHIMA and at ACUDA. And the other part that I wanted to point out was that on our campus, literally over 85 different Washington University and St. Louis personnel were involved with this installation and this process. It was not a two-man process. It was a full process that involved members of these different committees, members of this different management, members of different departments, etc. So it clearly was a campus-wide process. All right, so I look on the wall. It looks like we have about 9 minutes. Jamie, you want to let us know if there's any questions?
Thank you, Mark and Matt. It looks like we have had a couple questions. Looks like we have had a couple questions come in. We also want to encourage anyone that's attending the webinar, please do submit those questions. We'll get to as many as we have time for. So let's jump right in. One of the first questions that we have concerns weather-related alerts. Mark and Matt, you all were talking about how obviously you're in an area where you see a lot of tornadoes, how you manage those alerts. Thinking about that, how do you manage tornado warnings that might not affect all of your campuses? Maybe it's just going to affect one or two of the different areas that you're looking to send that emergency message out to.
Yeah, so luckily 5 of the 6 of our campuses are all within 5 square miles of one another, so that polygon that we showed encompasses all of those. And that's where the most of our population is. So we use that automated script to push that out. Now our 6th campus is a research farm about 20 miles south of the city. We equip them with a NOAA weather alert radio and other technologies to warn their people. But if our system goes off, theirs goes off as well, and then they have some additional ways to notify their people as well.
The other thing that we may want to mention is twofold. One is we always want to recognize that just because people's offices are on one campus, that doesn't mean that they won't be in the middle of traveling to the other campus for a meeting. Maybe some people have 2 offices. So we worked really hard at the beginning to understand that if we're going to send a message out, and it's that important about an emergency, especially a Save Lives Now emergency, it's going to go to everybody on every campus, including a tornado, right? But what we did, especially when we looked at a shooter kind of violence thing, what we said was we're going to use every method at our disposal for the campus which is directly affected. And then we're going to use what we would call passive communication. So we picked 2 or 3 of the multi-mode communications like email and maybe email and desktop pop-up. To let people know, hey, there was a situation on this campus. That way we had a shot at making sure they got the message if they were coming over here for a meeting of some kind. So, I don't know, hopefully that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Next question, you guys provided a lot of great information about the WUSTL app, utilizing that to disseminate mobile phone text messages to students, faculty, employees. The question that we have here, when you do push those notifications to mobile phones, do you ever have any issues loading them from the cell phone companies?
All right, so yeah, and that's a great question, but let's distinguish here, right? When we send out via EverBridge, that's messages going out via the cell process through the cellular providers. When we send a message out via the WUSTL app, that's actually going out via the data network. That's why when we send it out WUSTL app, it's going out via the data network, and it's getting onto those phones, like you said, literally in seconds as opposed to minutes or chunks of minutes. That happens when you have the cell towers involved through the phone cellular network. That's sort of the difference between the two. Beyond that, I neither one of us stayed at a Holiday Inn last night, so I'm not sure I can get much more technical than that. But there is a difference between sending it out via text message over, because when it originates from EverBridge via text message, then it goes out to the cell phone providers and out through their network. And again, as opposed to the app, which goes out via the data network to Urban Airship and then out, if that helps.
Great, thank you, Matt. Our next question really talks about disseminating very specific messages to specific groups of individuals. When WUSTL does send out emergency notifications, how do you determine when to send out a campus-wide emergency alert versus an emergency message that only goes out to one or more specific campuses?
Yeah, so as Matt just said a few minutes ago, if we believe that the emergency is just affecting one campus, then we actively set off all the bells and whistles at that campus, and then passively through email and desktop pop-ups send it to the remainder of our population, because so many of our employees and students go between different campuses throughout the day. So we, in effect, we want to warn everybody, but we more actively hit the people that are on the affected campus. Now we can also, if we just want to send to a very small group, such as just all employees instead of the students, we can do that through different scripts in EverBridge and alert us as needed. If we just wanted to alert our crisis management team to a protest and please report to the Emergency Operations Center, we can do that small subset, and then as the situation grows, we can use other parts of the system to cast that net much wider.
And let's also, we worked really hard at distinguishing. If it is an emergency that we feel like we need to use the emergency notification system, it's going, at some level, it's going to everybody, period, end of story. But let's distinguish between that and a crime alert. So our chief of police and our head of our protective services, they will send out crime alerts if there's, say, there's some criminal activity or a mugger that's on the loose, have been, in a certain area on campus. That will be a directed email from the police chief or from the protective services folks that goes to just a certain population. That won't go to everybody on campus. But that's not a campus emergency where we're using our notification system. There are pieces of that notification system, again, modules that we may use for other things, but really, we've really pushed hard on the idea that if we're going to use this system, we're going to use Alert Us to send out a message. It's of such a value that we need to make sure everybody has an opportunity to get that at some level. It may not be through every bell and whistle because the incident's not on their campus, but it is at least to a point where they can get it so they know if they are traveling to that campus, they know what to watch out for.
Great. And it looks like we have time for maybe one more question here. Our next question really covers, Mark and Matt, you both did a great job of going through the process that WUSTL went through to implement its emergency notification system at the beginning of the webinar. Our question is this. When an organization is looking to expand its emergency notification system components, do you have recommendations on the best ways to go about sort of gaining buy-in from upper-level management to make that happen?
Yeah, so our approach is after every time that we actually send out an alert, every time there's a national incident, every time there's a test, we have a core group that comes together and we look at what we can learn from that, and then we just kind of bring in some small working groups of some employees and students and say, where are we missing? So for instance, cell phones weren't working in basements. So how can we fix that problem? Sure, we could install a DAS and all this technology in there, but then we looked at, we've got all these computer labs and stuff that if we add the desktop pop-ups, that solves that problem. With the voice over fire alarm systems, yeah, we could install a lot of beacons and other technology all throughout the building in every room, or when we're upgrading the fire alarm system, I can put one beacon, one text-to-speech device, and now pump it through the whole building. So if you just kind of look at what's the root problem and look at what are your best solutions and who you're trying to reach, then you can get that buy-in from upper management.
And I think the other thing that we've done really well here is that we've leveraged existing systems. The cable TV plant is there not to provide emergency communication, but provide entertainment for our students. Well, we've leveraged that. So we invested a little bit of money to be able to override that system, to use it as a module. Would we have spent all the money we needed to invest to put in a cable TV system just so we could have that mode of communication? No. We would have said, no, that's way too expensive just, for that return. So we've looked at existing systems that are there, like the fire alarm system. So there's a little bit of investment, right? But we found that it's like 25% more to invest in the voice over fire alarm system as opposed to just a standard voice system, right? So the investment, the return on investment was there to say, okay, we'll spend a little bit extra to use that existing technology to leverage our emergency notification system. There's, quite frankly, there's very little of that what we use that is specific to just emergency notification. There's the sirens, and if you recall, our text messaging system originally was not used for emergencies. It became that, right? But it didn't. So there's really like EverBridge and the Alert Us stuff that are primarily there to be emergency notification. The rest of the stuff, we've really leveraged stuff that was already out there or was being used for other things. And I think that's really sort of the key, especially when it comes to return on investment. You've got to be able to, there's a limited fund of money on any campus to spend for emergency communication. And you've got to be able to make the case that says, hey, this bundle of money is going to have the biggest return because, and here's why, A, B, C, D, E.
And if you can tie it to campus standards, like your campus building or facility standards, then it's already built in there. So when a new building goes up or remodel, they don't really even notice that cost because it's something that they can't opt out of putting that in.
Great response. Thank you both so much. We'd like to conclude with just some additional information on some of our upcoming Alert Us webinars. As you'll see, we have webinars in July, August, and September. They're all going to be really great sessions. July is going to focus on our USB panic button. August will focus on a similar topic that was touched on today, that emergency mass notification integration component. And then September will focus on our innovative fire alarm integration. If you'd like more information on these webinars or are interested in registering, please go to our website at www.alertus.com/alertus webinar series. Again, just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. If you'd like a recording of the webinar, just send us an email at marketing@alertus.com and we'll send that over. And finally, if you'd like any additional information on Alert Us, feel free to visit us at our website. So we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and have a great afternoon.